Hello, welcome to Writing Mental Health. Today's topic is Release the Past to Vibrate Higher. I'm your host, Natsuya. I have ADHD and autism, and these are some of the tips that I use in order to manage my neurodivergent life. And today we're going to look at 5 tips to start a healing journey. And this can be any healing journey, including, getting over grief or starting something new or anything that, we need to do some shadow work for. So today we're going to look at 5 tips to release the past to vibrate higher. So tip number 1, identifying pain points. We need to understand what are those things that cause us pain. It could be anything. It could be a person, it could be an event, it could be an activity, it could be a habit, it could be something that we are doing. But in order to get to a place where we can start to heal, we need to understand what is affecting us. And by identifying those pain points or those things that, cause us to get stuck or go on a spin or lash out or try to avoid, identifying those things are very important. And so that is tip 1. And that will help us on our journey. Tip 2, determine what makes you anxious. So if there are certain events or things, so for example, if you have test anxiety, and taking tests and studying for them, especially if it's a subject that, is difficult for you, we may end up procrastinating. But by not studying, that's going to kind of set up a downward spiral. If it is a subject that is hard for us and then we don't study for it, well, you may fail the test. So if you're afraid of failing the test and then you set up a situation where you don't study and decide to stay in bed the whole time, then you just set up a recurring cycle. And so if you know you have to study, but instead you spend the entire time going out and playing video games and going to the park, well, you set up a situation that's going to make your anxiety worse. So when it comes to taking that test, now when you're sitting for the test, your anxiety is higher. Step number 3, are you triggered? So say that you are in a work environment and you're in a meeting and you bring up a subject and, people, they dismiss what you say. And then somebody else later brings up the same subject and, everybody in the room, applauds them. Or somebody asks a question, what's your favorite, dessert? And you say mango ice cream and everybody else says chocolate cake. And the response is, to your mango ice cream, well, that's strange or that's weird. And everybody else is like, oh, well, chocolate cake, I like that too, that's great. Now, that could partly be, you're just different, have different tastes, but is that something that triggers you and makes you maybe feel not part of the group? That could be a trigger. But you need to understand why that triggers you. Tip number 4, is there something that you're avoiding? So if you don't want to have to go to a certain location and you just don't go. So, for example, if, you were in a bicycle accident at a certain street and, maybe you got hurt. And so, once you recover and, you're riding your bicycle again to work, you avoid that street. Well, you were avoiding that street because when you got into the accident, that was kind of a traumatic experience. And one way that we end up protecting ourselves is to, avoid that event or that place. Especially if we got hurt there. And so understanding what you're avoiding and identifying that is one way to get us ready to start a healing journey. Tip number 5, does something scare you? So, you may avoid things that scare you. So if there's a dark alley, and you got robbed in that alley, well, you may end up avoiding that alley again if your situation, occurs, like if it's nighttime and you decide not to go down that alley, or, if you have an accident somewhere and, you decide that I never want to do that again. That may be something that scares you. Maybe a certain location. I don't want to go into that building. Well, why is that? Or it could be, I don't want to go back to that school. Something could have happened, that scares you. And it may not be something that's scaring you in the present, but something in the past may have occurred. And so if we can identify those 5 things, our pain points, anxiety, triggers, things that we avoid, we can start our healing journey by looking at those things and identifying them. If we write them down and understand that they are what they are, we can look at those things as places to start. And a lot of times, when we run into a present situation, so if you're having a conversation in the current day with somebody, and then they say something, and all of a sudden you end up yelling at them and lash out, there may be something underneath that, a subconscious thing that has not been resolved, that is rearing its head and causing that reaction. One of the first things that we need to do when we start on a healing journey is that we have to understand that we need to forgive ourselves. And by doing that, we set up a situation where we're ready to start down that path. And so, once we do that, we can learn to release the past so that we can vibrate higher. And next time, we'll look at how to do that.